What's up, Spanish students? This is Profe Ache from Spanish from Scratch. Today I've got an exciting topic to talk about just because a lot of times when we're doing these Spanish lessons, this 3-month stage, it's kind of this intense process where we have to get these 3 steps done in order to have a base, which is super important, and you do want to have that discipline and kind of things like that. But I also think that it's important to be practicing studying the language in a fun way. And so one of those ways, especially in the vocab stage, when you have to memorize a large list of words, the best way to do this is actually to not just do like rote memorization, writing it down 1,000 times, repeating it out loud 1,000 times. Not that those strategies are necessarily bad, they're just not as effective. And the way that I like to learn vocabulary, and I've taught others how to learn vocabulary, is actually through mnemonic devices. Mnemonic devices are basically just stories that you make to connect to words, and so that's how you memorize words. I have a terrible memorization. Like, if you ask any of my friends, they will tell you that I easily forget things. But when it comes to language, and maybe I should use mnemonic devices elsewhere, but when it comes to language, when I use a mnemonic device for any word that I don't know, it gets stuck into my long-term memory just because I've worked up that muscle, and it's fun. You get to use your imagination, kind of think back on like funny stories or experiences, and it helps that word stick as you make that word. And so you could just do it the boring way, and you can learn a lot of words that way. I think less efficiently, but you can. Or you can do it the fun way. The steps for the fun way are just with mnemonic devices, are find a word that you need to learn. Okay, so for example, on this slide that I'll put up right here, it's granja. Okay, so granja is the word. It means farm. Okay, and the first thing that I think of, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the word and then I'm going to say, okay, what do I think of when I think of farm? So step 2 is think of a story. Think of a story that you have, or an experience, or a thought process that you can connect to this word with. And so what I connect with is I went to school at Iowa State University. That's where I studied Spanish and linguistics. And granja, okay, so the first thing that I look at is the first part. A farm is big, right? And so most people know the word grande or gran. Okay, in Spanish, that just means big. Okay, so I connected that part of the word to a story. Now, what's my story though? Okay, my story could be, I always laughed at Iowans talking about cow tipping. Okay, that's just a kind of a funny thing to talk about, cow tipping, because there's lots of farms. Okay, so the gran, because farms are big, and ha, which is like a laughing sound, right? You say ha ha ha. Super funny, right? Ha is the laughing part. I laugh at people cow tipping and the idea of this cow tipping. Okay, so step number 2 is create a story, and then I kind of just did step number 3 is to actually make a connection with the actual spelling of the word. Okay, so it's not just a story. That's what I see a lot of my students doing right away when they are trying mnemonic devices. It's actually, you want to make a story and then connect a part of the spelling of that word to that story so that it gives you a clue as you're thinking about it and when you're studying that. Okay, so step 1, pick a word. Step 2, find a story for that word. Okay, what do you think of when you think of that word? Step 3, make a connection with the spelling of the word. And then step 4, if you're making flashcards, for example, make pictures. Okay, so put in pictures, or if you're not making flashcards, you can just draw this. Okay, so I find this extremely helpful as far as memorization. And truly, when you do your first one, it's gonna take a little bit longer. It's gonna be 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes even to just memorize one word. Okay, but as you're going through that process of memorizing that word, in that process, you're thinking of a story and making a connection to that word, and you're memorizing it while you're doing the kind of tedious work of making the mnemonic device. And so a lot of times when I when I'm doing this at my school that I teach Spanish at, a lot of my students are like, I don't need to do this. Like, this is useless. Some of the kids really catch on and have fun with it, but some of my students say, no, I don't need to do this. This is useless. But as they're making the story itself, they're actually putting it into their long-term memory. And then I come to class next time and say, hey, Joe, do you remember this word that we practiced last time? And they pick it up right away after 2 days, which doesn't usually happen. So it's really effective, and it's backed by science, but it is a muscle. So the first ones that you make, it's going to take a little bit longer, but as you grow in this, I've been doing it for 1.5 years, 2 years. I've grown a lot faster, and I've been able to help my students with making examples and coming up with things kind of off the cuff. So that's kind of my spiel about mnemonic devices. Feel free to comment if you have any questions about, like, hey, how do I make a mnemonic device for this word, or like, what would you suggest to do? And I would love to respond. Don't forget to subscribe, and thank you for watching. Good luck studying Spanish this week. Adios.